Games with an eerie Lovecraftian twist have been some of my favorite game experiences to date. From the decrepit streets of Yarnum and Bloodborne to the endless seas of Dredge, it has always piqued my interest to explore the parts of the world that mankind was never meant to touch and the horrors hidden just beyond the veil of our own consciousness. In today's review, I'll be covering a game that very much pulls from that same realm of madness. Alone at sea with nothing but the skeletons of the past to keep you company, will you lay them to rest or will you join them? Welcome to Still Wakes the Deep Siren's Rest. Now, to understand where we're starting in the Siren's Rest DLC, you have to have some prior knowledge of what happened in the events of the Still Wakes the Deep base game. If you haven't played it yet, I recommend you stop reading this review, or if we're on YouTube, of course, stop listening, and play it through as the events are directly connected and the DLC occurs in a world after the events of the base game. That's your warning. I promise there's spoilers ahead, and honestly, what do you got to lose by playing it? It's a great game, I promise. Now that we've weeded out those that haven't finished the base game, we can really get into the story of Siren's Rest and what has happened in the years since the Beira D oil rig fell into the sea. At the end of the base game, our unlikely hero Kaz ignited the oil rig and seemingly destroyed the Lovecraftian horror they had awakened from the ocean's floor. Siren's Rest picks up more than 10 years after Kaz's sacrifice and puts you in the control of a specialist dive team as they attempt to both understand what caused the oil rig's collapse while also chronicling the final resting place of the Beira D's crew. You play as Mari, the leader of this dive team, as she attempts to navigate the screeching wreckage and find out what mysteries lay in the dark and claustrophobic corridors that remain of the Bear D. This has you cutting your way through the rusted metal corridors with a precision welding machine, logging and capturing the final resting places of the crew we grew so attached to in the base game, as well as navigating the endless darkness that seems to be pulling at you from every side. The world of Siren's Rest is a much more confined adventure than the base game in that you are almost always squeezing through tight spaces in the rusted remains of the Bear D. When it was above the water surface, you had more freedom in being able to get out and kind of get a bit of sunlight to work on your tam, but the opposite is very much true in the CLC. Your adventure starts and ultimately ends at the bottom of the ocean, and it really builds off the looming dread that this version of the seafloor sells so well. Those that suffer from thalassophobia, which I'm sure I just butchered, or claustrophobia will dread the world that developers have created here. And honestly, I have to give them props for the eerie silence that seems to follow the player as they navigate what can vividly be described as a rusted metal sarcophagus. The story has the same ups and downs emotionally that the base game sold so well, and I have to commend them for tackling yet another aspect of the human psyche that we all run from. While the base game had Kaz morphing into the man he always wanted to be, Siren's Rest deals with the denial of acceptance even when the answer is right in front of you. Though it doesn't have as much of the creature horror as I would have liked, as really there's barely any, it does an okay job at closing out the story of the Barra D in a way that makes Kaz's decision echo throughout not only his own personal life, but the lives of those who were lost on that faithful day. The problems really start to rise, in my opinion, when we get into how long this game actually is. I will admit that I sectioned off the second half of my day to play this DLC and was disappointed to find that the campaign took me a meager 2 hours to beat while exploring nearly every nook and cranny of the seafloor that was accessible. I will say that I almost immediately loaded up another playthrough and went through it again in the same amount of time to get the other ending, but at the end of both my playthroughs, I was still only looking at about 3.5 hours total. Granted, this is only a $13 DLC with a huge amount of deals going on right now to get the base game and Siren's Rest package together for around $24, but honestly, I would have liked more content. It very much plays like a narrative driven game, and it doesn't really have much of, or as much of the quote unquote action oriented sequence as the base game had. It sucks because the whole concept of Siren's Rest is honestly amazing, but unfortunately, it's a more relaxed version than what I expected. It's heavy on the narrative, and while I enjoyed both playthroughs thoroughly and enjoyed my time, I wanted more of what made the first game so terrifying. The gameplay loop is simple, and you're going to be getting the majority of your entertainment from reliving the events of the base game, not so much learning from anything new and nefarious that's stalking you from the shadows. If you enjoyed the emotional tones and the dark setting of Still Wakes the Deep, you'll feel right at home here. Just don't go into it expecting as many horror elements as you might be used to. It is very much a DLC filled to the brim with atmospheric horror, as opposed to the intricate seesaw of cat and mouse the base game was so good at. That aspect is pretty much entirely absent, and the gameplay suffers because of it. You are very much a rat trapped in a cage, and while that idea is terrifying enough when you're hundreds of feet beneath the ocean, it needed a bit more to make it have more of an impact from a gameplay perspective, is what I'll say. It wasn't awful, and I enjoy narrative based games, but I think I expected more of the action that kind of kept the base game going, and there's not really much of it, if I'm being completely honest. And that's really why I find myself very conflicted with rating this game. On one hand, Siren's Rest has built one of the most convincingly terrifying underwater playgrounds I have seen in years. I mean, it is bleak and beautiful in the same breath, and really does an amazing job at bringing you back to the events of the first game in the most depressing way possible. Very much reminds me of the Bioshock series, so anybody that kind of likes that underwater creepiness and just like the eerie silence of it, you're probably going to love it, especially if you're a fan of the first game. On the flip side, the gameplay is relatively tame. I don't mind a quote unquote on the rails narrative adventure, and they do a great job at that aspect of the game, but the gameplay and the lack of many of the horror elements present in the base game are bound to make fans drawn to its Lovecraftian undertones, in short, a little disappointed. I enjoyed I enjoyed my time putting the crew of the Beira D to rest, but I mean, honestly, I found myself really wanting more, with nothing but a bleak, endless sea to keep me company. Now, did I hate this DLC? No. By all means, let's not get it twisted. This is a very solid 7 out of 10 DLC, and that is probably strictly based on the fact that I really enjoyed the base game. There isn't as much of the creature horror as people would probably expect, so I think that's going to draw a lot of people into the kind of rating this on the bad side. However, I do think it's pretty cool just to be able to have this kind of option to kind of end the story of the Barrady in a way that kind of feels respectful and is kind of telling someone else's story in a way that I think feels just the right amount of emotional and honestly the perfect amount of kind of meaning behind it, I guess, so to say, without ruining too much. As far as a rating goes, it's a 7 out of 10, like I said, and honestly, I enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed the Still Wake City base game, you are probably going to enjoy it as well. But that is all I have for today. This is going to be the second review released in the same day because we're pumping these things out this summer. But as always, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day, a good rest of your month, a good rest of your year. And as always, I will see you on the next one.